Asato ma sadgamaya tamaso ma jyotirgamaya mrityurma amritam gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om, lead us from the unreal to the real, lead us from darkness unto light, lead us from death to immortality. Om, peace, peace, peace. Darkness to light, it always works. Good morning, namaste everybody, and welcome to this session of Ask Swami. We used to get so much mail from all over the world with questions. So we thought we can have this public forum online where we can respond to at least a fraction of the questions. Our brave volunteers are deluged with mail from all over the world, and they do a great job of selecting some of those questions. And then we have a live audience, you. Of course, there's a internet audience also. All over the world, people are tuning in for this. Good. As usual, Diane has some questions for us.
Yes, Swami, good morning. The first question is from Pradeep, who has one basic question. Why do we need to search for the unchanging self, capital S? Why do we need that? Why can't we simply live as the waker, dreamer, and deep sleeper? What should drive me to seek the fourth, which is the conscious self that remains unchanged through all these three states?
All right, so the question is referencing the Mandukya Upanishad, which is one of the foundational texts of Advaita Vedanta. In the Mandukya Upanishad, the approach is very simple. It says that our life, this life which we think is our life, this is just part of it. You're the waking self here, you're the waker, and this is your waking world, the life that we have. And we might think, that's right, that's the life, what else is there? Well, there's another part to it. When you fall asleep, what happens? All this world disappears. This world of our waking. The bedroom where you've fallen asleep, that disappears. The bed you're where. Even your body disappears from your experience. Remember, it's an inside-out approach. What I mean by that is that, this will illustrate. Years ago, in a talk given by Swami Sarvapriyananda at the University of Calcutta, he was talking about the three states of waking, dreaming, deep sleep, and the witness consciousness. And when he came to deep sleep, he said, so in deep sleep, there is no world, there is no body, and there is no mind. And one professor of physiology couldn't take it anymore. He got up in exasperation and he said, what do you mean there's no body? I can see the fellow snoring on his bed. Yeah. Yes, that's from a third-person perspective. From outside you see. But what is the experience of you, the one who is in sleep? So when we fall asleep, the external world disappears. The physical body also is gone from our experience. And even the waking self, I who went to bed, that also is erased. And then we have our dream world, a world which we later, after waking up, we know it is part of our dream, but then it seems to be real. So it's a dream world. And we are in that, with a dream body not in that sense of a dream, but a dream, the body you would want in your dreams. No, but it's you are there in your own dreams, and you are this person. So that's the dreamer and the world of the dreaming, the dreamer's world. And then there's a third part of our experience, when even that stops. External world, the waking world is gone, dreams also stop, just blank, nothingness, deep sleep. And Advaita Vedanta says, all three appear and disappear, come and go to you, whatever you are. If the waking world and the waking body-mind come and go with the waking state, if the dream world and the dream body-mind, quote-unquote, come and go with the dream state, if the peculiar blankness of deep sleep comes and goes with the deep sleep state, then what is the one underlying experiencer of all these? That's called the fourth. Fourth, waker is 1, dreamer is 2, and deep sleeper is 3. The fourth in respect to these 3. And so the fourth is described as pure consciousness, just awareness, existence awareness. Limitless. Why limitless? Because it's not limited by the waking, by the dreaming, by the deep sleep. They all come and go. The waker, dreamer, and deep sleeper are limited by each other. They don't extend over to the other states. So, that way. And it's said to be non-dual. Non-dual because from that perspective of the fourth, there is really no second reality. It is that fourth alone which appears as the waker and the waking world, as the dreamer and the dream world, as the deep sleeper and the deep sleep blankness. So they are not actually first, second, third. There is only one reality. It's only with respect to the waker, dreamer, deep sleeper that you call your real self the fourth. Anyway, that's the Mandukya, that's in Mandukya in a nutshell. And that's what he's referring to. Why should we be interested in this so-called fourth, our real self, pure consciousness, whatever? Why not just be this person? Well, that's the basic question of spiritual life. I mean, it's not just a Mandukya question. Why should I at all be interested in enlightenment? It's because when we are in this condition of that, I am this person and this is my life and that's it. Notice, I am subject to all sorts of terrors and tribulations, all sorts of problems. I am open to suffering, vulnerable. Either I am actually suffering or potentially there's a world of suffering waiting for me. I am this body which is born and aging and subject to pain and illness and eventually guaranteed death. I am this mind so sensitive. Vivekananda says, slave to a good word, slave to a bad word, slave to a little bit of a misbehavior from others. We react helplessly to this world as the mind. So the mind and body are subject to a lot of unpleasantness and unhappiness, and identified with that, we suffer in this world. It's a fact, the fact of human suffering. This is what the Buddha identified as the primal existential problem, dukkha. Suffering, or at least dissatisfaction. Sometimes very intense suffering, and if nothing else, the low, unhappy drone of existential angst at the background, which is continuous. How do you overcome that? All of it. How do you go beyond suffering, attain fulfillment? So that is the goal of spirituality. In every tradition, whatever the language, you can speak the language of nirvana, you can speak the language of liberation, salvation, whatever you call it. It's basically transcending the limitations and problems of the human condition. Every religion promises that. So that's also the goal of the Mandukya. And he says, why should I not be satisfied as just this waking person? Because as this waking person, you are subject to all the problems of life, and when you realize yourself as the fourth, you transcend these problems. I'm using the word transcend. It's not that you will solve world poverty or one's own, the cancer of the body, or any kind of, or my own particular relationship problem, financial problem, any such problem will I solve? No. But all of those problems will be solved in one stroke by realizing they're all part of an appearance to you, the consciousness, the one reality which is free of all of these problems. It's like, when you realize this, a movie as a movie, until we do not realize it as a movie, and if we somehow feel trapped within the plot of the movie, we are subject to a comedy. We may laugh at it, then the next show is a tragedy, and you'll be bound to weep. And notice, it's worse than that, because When you laugh at a comedy or weep about in a tragedy, it's still an aesthetic experience for you because you know it's a movie. But if you do not know and you think yourself to be a character in the movie, then you're trapped. So the question boils down to, why should I not continue to be part of the movie? You must realize that a movie is a movie. Will it stop the movie? No. But then once you realize a movie is a movie, you don't want to stop the movie also. You're fine with it. If there's a movie, it's a comedy, okay, it's a comedy, I'll laugh. If it's a tragedy, all right, I'll enjoy, quote and unquote, the tragedy in the sense that aesthetic experience, and I'll maybe weep with the characters in the tragedy, but I know it's a movie. And if it shuts down, blank, no movie at all on the screen, it's all right, that's also natural. Once in a while there is no movie. That's a deep sleep. But I know I am the witness of all of these. And in the movie, at least, you are a witness and there's a movie separate from you. Here, the movie is playing on you. You, the consciousness. In you, the movie of the waking, the dreaming, and the deep sleep. Gaudapada in the Mandukya says, there are actually only two states, not even waking, dreaming, deep sleep. There are only two states, appearing and not appearing. He calls them dreaming and sleeping. Gaudapada's take on that, Gaudapada is the commentator, the first commentator on the Mandukya, Shankaracharya's guru's guru, a very radical non-dualist. He says, no, there are not even three states, waking, dreaming, deep sleep. There are actually two states. We are either dreaming or sleeping, deep sleep. What's dreaming? So-called waking is a dream, so-called dream is a dream. Why? Because things appear to you. Things appear to you. You think this is a real waking state. It's just like a dream. And the dream is a dream. So you have a dream state, which is of two kinds. This one and the other dream which you have in your sleep. And you have a deep sleep which you call sleeping, which is blankness. Nothing appears to you. Just blankness. These are the only two states for the ignorant, for those who are not enlightened. For those who are enlightened, they are the ones who are truly awake. That, by the way, is the meaning of the word Buddha, the one who has awakened. They are the one who are truly awake. When you're truly awake, then you are awake even when the dream is going on, you're awake even when the deep sleep is going on. And you see in your nature as awareness, none of these worldly problems appear. So, all of this is just to say this, straightforward answer is to take you beyond sufferings. In Shankaracharya's words, sarva anartha prahanaya, in order to overcome, to transcend all forms of misery and unhappiness. That's why we need to realize ourselves as not just this waker or the dreamer or the deep sleeper, but the underlying one undivided consciousness. Yeah. Let's take another question.
This question is from Leonid Shok. I am a 21-year-old from Ukraine. I read in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna that God is a wish-fulfilling tree. I want to be a good, sincere devotee who aspires only for noble things from the spiritual point of view, but my heart is still largely turned towards the world. I want worldly success for myself and those close to me, as well as peace in my country, Ukraine. Despite knowing that God can grant me all this if I intensely pray for it, I hesitate to do it because I feel a little immoral about it. Although for the last couple of days I have started to spend several hours each day praying for the end of the war. If my passion is turned towards the world and I am not yet seized by a strong desire for spiritual awakening, is it okay to pray to God to satisfy my desires, reach my goals, and so on? Will it hurt my progress, or can it be used as a means to an end, after which I can outgrow this tendency and become wholeheartedly devoted to God?
Okay, that's a very good question. Just 21 years old, you can see the sincerity in the writing, and in such terrible circumstances in Ukraine. See, this speaks to the earlier question also. All these problems in the world, at one level, they will go on in one form or the other. Who would have thought at the beginning of the second decade of the 21st century, we are again faced with war. Around this time, the First World War had just ended in the 20th century. 100 years ago. They were just coming out of, the war had ended, and they were coming out of also a pandemic. Sounds familiar. And here the war has not ended, and we are not quite out of the pandemic yet. Yeah. So you notice the nature of problems, of suffering. It doesn't go away. It changes. Vivekananda said it's like arthritis. You chase it from the knees, it'll go to the elbows. You cure poverty, you'll have the problems of prosperity. In some form or the other, suffering continues. Now, what he has asked for, of course, one can ask God for an end to the war, as he is praying for that. Definitely. And it's, I've noticed that people, here you meet Russians and Ukrainians, and one interesting thing is that the one thing both want is an end to the war, end to the fighting, end to the killing. Can one ask God for that? Certainly. One can ask God for it. Anything that is for the welfare of the masses, for large numbers of people, an end to general suffering. Could you ask for the end of the pandemic, end of the war? Yes. Yes, we can. Any person who has a noble, like this idealistic young man, has a noble worldview, who wants good for everybody, you can pray, and one should pray for the good of the world. What about personal desires in this world? His question is, I firmly believe if I pray to God, my desires will be satisfied. So, should I pray for that? And I know those desires will not make me permanently happy, only spirituality will, but I really honestly don't desire spirituality wholeheartedly. Do I desire God wholeheartedly and I have no taste for the world? I can't say that honestly. So can I pray for fulfillment of my worldly desires, and will that eventually take me beyond worldly desires and I'll become wholly spiritual? The answer is yes and no. No, because satisfaction of worldly desires does not take one beyond worldly desires. This is an ancient truth. We find this theme again and again in Indian literature, spiritual texts, and literature also. People who, like the famous case of the king Yayati, there's one case, stories like that, who wanted to exhaust all desires by enjoying desires. And what happened? It just kept on increasing, kept on proliferating. I remember the first thing that we were taught in our economics class. The economics is a science, which wants to match unlimited human desires to limited resources. So can one satisfy these unlimited desires? One cannot. And if one tries to, those desires just keep on. The horizon of satisfaction keeps on receding. Okay, I just invented that and coined that. That's nice. So the horizon of satisfaction just keeps on receding. And that's what we find in life. So it's best to understand that there is this pursuit of satisfying one's desires is not a path to either worldly satisfaction, which is impossible, or it's not even a path to spirituality. One must step back at some point. Now your question is, but I don't honestly want to step back from the world. A part of you does. That's why you're interested. That's why we are all that's why we are all here. We are interested. Do we really, really want God? Honestly, not totally. But do we want God? Yes, we do. All of us, we do. We want to be like that. We want to be like them, like the mystics of all religions and all times, who were intensely, completely focused on spirituality. And we see how happy, not in a smiley face, happy sense, how fulfilled they were, how deeply fulfilled they were. And we want to be like that. So we want to want God. Yes, that's true. That state is fine. It's fine that because of my past conditionings, I still have worldly desires and cravings. And at the same time, I genuinely, honestly, I want I want to realize God, I want to love God, I want to become enlightened, I want self-knowledge, in whichever language you put it. I really want that also. That's the human condition. That's the condition of most spiritual seekers. Now, what does Leonid do at this stage? You pray to God, you're reading the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, you pray to Sri Ramakrishna, pray to God in whatever form you have devotion or faith in, and pray for love of God, devotion, bhakti. Pray for dispassion from worldliness, from worldly desires. Pray for focus of mind on spiritual, on your meditation, on your study, on your prayer. Pray for these things, which we find ourselves wanting in, and so we can help we can use some divine help there. Now, another thing he said, I'm convinced that if I pray, my desires will be satisfied. Something like that he said. And the answer there is yes and no. Yes, all sincere prayers will be answered. I'll repeat that. Prayer is always answered. But the answer may not always be what we expect it to be. We are praying for something and we expect God to fulfill, like Amazon Prime, like that. God will deliver exactly what I want. And one day delivery. I want it immediately. And exactly what I ordered. Even Amazon goofs up sometimes. And God is not bound to fulfill our desires as we want them to be fulfilled. It's like human parents. As kids may ask for anything from their parents. And the parents may be able to grant at least some of it. But it's not necessary that mom or dad will give you exactly what you want. They have a mind of their own, and they're concerned about your welfare. So they'll give you what is possible and what's good for you, and maybe they won't give you what is not good for you. Maybe they'll give you something instead of what you wanted, and that might be even better for you. So, yes, God always answers prayers, but the answer might not be exactly what we asked for. So should I pray? Yes. Pray for fulfillment of my worldly desires? As a rule, no. That's why you get that slight feeling of immorality when you pray for personal things. Sometimes it's impossible not to pray for personal. You can pray for big things, like for everybody's welfare. Let the war stop. Let the pandemic go away. I remember when it started. I was at the Harvard Divinity School at that time. And Harvard was one of the first universities where it was taken seriously very quickly. In the United States, that's also the place where actually one of the epicenters. There was a conference in Boston where it spread. One of the sources where it spread very fast. I still remember this class on prayer. Christian contemplative prayer by Professor Stephanie Paulsell. And she said a couple of things. We were studying it was the Interior Castle. It's a Christian mystic work on mystical prayer. And Saint Teresa is writing to the nuns under her care. And the professor pointed out, notice how often she tells them to take care of their health. And you might be a little puzzled, why go on and on about, be careful about your health? Well, it's because she explained to us, in those days, the medieval times, people were often unhealthy. They were sick a lot of times. There were a lot of these diseases going around. That was just a few days before the pandemic hit. So it's like in contrast, we are fine. We don't understand what's this unhealthiness, this sickness. Why are they so worried about health? And the next week, literally, the world began to shut down. It's almost like God heard this discussion and he said, oh, really? And then in the next week's class, the professor, she read out from a text from the Torah, where it's a very interesting text. What does God do all day long? So God has a routine, daily routine. So there's a time when God reads the scriptures and God prays, and God does answers his email, stuff like that. And it's like, and something like that actually. So part of that is God sits on the chair of judgment for a few hours every day. And so there are very deep prayers there that we beseech thee, our Heavenly Father, to have mercy upon us, to sit on the terrible seat of judgment, and to sit on your seat of mercy. So that, this was very evocative for all of us, because it was just at the beginning where it was recognized this is a pandemic. And within 48 hours, the whole university shut down. And the medical school, they were already engaged in trying to find a vaccine. And all that. At that time, they started. And they were saying it will take... I overheard conversations. For the first time, I heard the term social distancing. All those things came in right at that time. So can we pray to God that that forgive us, go easy on us, don't sit on the terrible seat of judgment. We know we deserve this, but let us off easy, let us off the hook. So yes, you can pray for all of humanity. But for personal desires, it's best that yes, I acknowledge, I'm honest, I acknowledge I have these desires, but I want to overcome them. I know they do not lead to any kind of deep satisfaction. So I want to overcome them. Give me dispassion. Give me love of God. Give me this yearning for God. This is what one should pray for. Okay. We'll take one more, and then a question from the gentleman there. You can come here and then ask the question. But first, one more question.
There are two questions on avidya. The first one is Piara Rudra. I am confused about the concept of avidya. If avidya is in Brahman, and Brahman is the only reality, then avidya is also real. Then how is mukti possible? And the second question is from Srini Iyengar. Swamiji, are maya and avidya interchangeable terms?
Avidya means ignorance. So again, in the Advaita Vedanta paradigm, the problem is ignorance. We do not know our real nature. If we would know our real nature, we would be free of samsara. So problem is ignorance, solution is knowledge. That ignorance is called avidya. Vidya means knowledge. Avidya, almost like the English negative, is not vidya, or ignorance. Not knowing our real nature. Now, if you say, this is a question in Advaita metaphysics and epistemology, if you say this ignorance is in Brahman, in the ultimate reality, because there's only the ultimate reality according to Advaita Vedanta, only Brahman exists. So if there is ignorance, you say there's ignorance, it must be in Brahman. And then the question was, in that case, Brahman is the only reality, and so this ignorance must be real. How can it be overcome? Well, I mean, this question can be fine-tuned, but I think we get the trend of this question. And the answer is, why does ignorance have to be something real that cannot be overcome? Ignorance can be overcome by knowledge. It's like, if the movie is on the movie screen, does that mean that the movie becomes real? The screen is real. If you're reading a Harry Potter book, the book is real for you. But what is printed on that, the fiction, the story which emerges out of that need not be as real as the book. So there's idea of multiple layers of truth, what are called ontological levels. There's an absolute reality, and in that there can be a less than reality. The mind which dreams, our dream state, we have a dream. But the mind which was dreaming is real. And when we wake up, we say that, oh, I was dreaming. So whatever happened in the dream, I dismiss as a part of the dream. That was a dream. That was not real. But I don't deny that I was dreaming. Exactly like that, if you go to the absolute level of reality, Brahman is the reality in which this entire universe appears, and we do not know the reality. That's our current problem. And knowledge will remove that not knowing, and then we will know that we are that reality Brahman. So that's not a problem at all. The second question was, is avidya and maya, are they interchangeable? Are they the same thing? Again, yes and no. Ignorance, we have ignorance, each of us. We are ignorant of our real nature. This is called avidya. Maya is the power of God, of Ishvara, by which this entire universe is projected. Now, what's the relationship between our individual ignorance and that Maya? It's a bit like Sri Ramakrishna gave the example of the poison in a cobra. You know, the cobra has poison in its fangs or in its poison sac, actually. And a little bit of that poison is enough to knock out its prey, a frog or a mouse. But all the poison is in the cobra and doesn't affect the cobra at all. In fact, it's the power of the cobra. Similarly, Maya is the power of God, and this avidya, which is there in all of us, which deludes us into samsara, is a part of that Maya, is a tiny, tiny part of that Maya. It keeps us in delusion. But it can also free us from delusion. Maya has these two sides, vidya and avidya, vidya Maya and avidya Maya. Avidya Maya, that which makes us think we are this body, we are this mind, we are this little person, and this world is exactly what I want. I want to be rich and I want to have fun. I mean, all I need is, on that side is Wall Street and this side is Broadway, and I need these two. I don't need the Vedanta society in between. That's avidya. And the vidya Maya says, those two are fun, but they are not deeply satisfying. Whereas what they say here in between, in the Vedanta society, it seems to hold some hope of transcending this condition, finding out some deep fulfillment. So that is also Maya. But this is Vidya Maya, the Maya of knowledge, Maya of enlightenment. Both of them constitute this world. One keeps us engrossed in this world, the other helps to free us from this world. And both are part of Maya. All right. The young man there. And then after you, the one behind you. Yeah, please come here. You, yes. Please come here. Tell us your name and ask the question.
Hi, my name is Mihir. What is your view and Vedanta's view on vegetarianism?
Remember that Swami Vivekananda's answer I can give you. He said that vegetarianism is actually a higher truth. If you want to be spiritual, it's better to be vegetarian than non-vegetarian. However, he made a point that he made it especially for Hindus. He said, your religion has gone into your cooking pots. Whether we shall eat with the left hand or the right hand, and all sorts of things associated with food and eating. And he says, if a race has put for thousands of years the best brains on thinking this through, it will lead to a race of imbeciles. And that's what has bedeviled Hinduism for a long time. So he was very careful there. Is food important? Yes. Is it all important? Not at all. So if you look around the world, people in most religions and spiritual people and practitioners, non-vegetarian. One might be surprised to know most of the Buddhists are non-vegetarian. The entire Tibetan Buddha, because they have no vegetables there, what's the name to eat on the Tibetan plateau? Now, does that make them less of Buddhists? Not at all. Not at all. What was the last meal that the Buddha had? Pork. He died, but that killed him. But yeah, I remember I met this Buddhist monk, and he asked me about this same question, and I said, we as monks, we eat what is given to us in ashram. Generally, that's the rule for monks, though Hindu monks in general are strictly vegetarian. So, but he said, in our ashram we have this rule that we eat what is given to us. So, for example, we don't eat beef. That's a cultural thing because we are Hindus. So that's the answer. Is vegetarianism better than non-vegetarianism? I would say without any reservation, yes. Is it an important question? Again, without any reservation, no.
Hi.
Yeah. What's your name?
Matt. It's an honor to be here. I was at the Varanasi Ramakrishna mission, and I was talking to the president there, and he was talking about love. And he was explaining me a way towards God, which was, he explained to me that you could imagine someone like your mother, and you feel that love that you have for your mother. And so he described that as you have love, and then the object of love, in this case, my mother. And that he told me of a meditative exercise where you use the image of your mother to evoke this love, and then you remove whatever it is that is your object of love, whether it's your mother or a close friend, until you have pure love. And then you can expand this love infinitely until there is pure consciousness, pure being one with God. And this was about a year ago, and I haven't been as successful as I would like to with applying this. And a lot of times I struggle with, as soon as I remove whoever I am evoking love towards, the feeling of love goes away. And so I would love to hear your response to this.
Okay. Varanasi. Yes, I think I know the Swami you're talking about. Yeah, that's a beautiful beautiful method, actually. And it connects to a very deep principle in Vedanta. All right, let me see. I can say a few things about it. First of all, a mother. Now that's somebody we always hold dear from our childhood onwards. So for example, the Tibetan Buddhists, they have this exercise where they say we have been going through samsara for an indefinite period of time, for millennia, for many, many thousands of lifetimes. And we say, all right, that's something that's sort of not normally accepted in the Indian milieu. So, now one interesting consequence of that is, we have all come across each other many times in past lives. All right, then, the next step, they say, is very interesting, is that then imagine then that these sentient beings whom you are interacting with, in each of them, in some lifetime, was your mother. And imagine the sacrifice that being went through, giving birth to you, nurturing you, just giving her life for you. And that's true not just of your mother, but all beings were actually your mother. Not theoretically, they were actually your mother at some point. Now imagine the kind of feeling you would have to everybody. That sort of unlimited debt and gratitude one would have. Now, that's a way of cultivating that loving kindness towards everybody. So it's very similar to what you said. But what the Swami told you then goes one step deeper, where it's actually that feeling which is important. That feeling of expansion and that unmixed love for the other. Now so one way of, instead of dropping the focus of your love, your mother, and then just holding on to the feeling, what the Tibetan Buddhists do is make everybody your mother. That might be a slightly easier way. Because that person evokes our love. If I drop the person, then the love seems to go away very quickly. Now, instead of dropping the person, can I sort of, like a exercise, meditative, philosophical exercise, see that person as everybody. So that's what they do. One reason why it's not immediately easy, it's a great method, but it's not immediately easy, is the flip side of it. See, there is only this much of psychic energy that we have. If I throw a great deal of it into the world, which most of us do, then there's actually very little left over for love of God or love of everybody in general. We have our energies flowing out in 100 different streams into the world. That's why this dispassion and passion for God, they go together. It's literally the same thing. So passion for the world and passion for God do not go together. So one must pull back from the world in as many ways as we can, be neutral towards the world, and then this accumulated emotion, this heart, it can be directed Godward or towards all sentient beings, which amounts to the same thing actually. Vivekananda said, the only God I know and worship is the sum total of all living souls. All right. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. We will take one more question from the lady there. Yes, please come. Yes, please come. Then we'll take some questions from
Namaskar, Swamiji.
Namaskar.
My name is Asha. If I understand correctly, the universe is like a dream that appears in pure consciousness or pure awareness. So my question is, does consciousness then can it change the dream or the the laws, the universe? Does it have control over what is appearing, or is the appearance like spontaneous, like what we see in our dreams? So is it just something that's appearing to consciousness over which it has no volitional control? In which case, it seems that pure consciousness is no longer omnipotent or all-powerful.
All right.
On the other hand...
Oh, hold on to the other hand.
Okay.
Now, I'm going to answer this first part of the question first, because there's a lot involved.
Okay.
There's a lot involved there. So this universe, all our life, is like an appearance in pure consciousness. What are you? You are pure consciousness. Like the Mandukya thing which we started off with. You are this pure consciousness in which the dream of your dreams appear, the dream of your waking appears, and no dreams at all, deep sleep. That also appears, and it keeps changing. But you are this background consciousness, like a movie screen or something. All right. But now she's asking, what's your name again? I'm sorry.
Asha.
Asha. Asha is asking, does the pure consciousness have any volitional control over this dream? Now, there is, one must investigate a little deeper. It's like asking, so if I identify myself as pure consciousness and this life is a dream, Asha's life is a dream, can I craft a better life for Asha as pure consciousness? The answer would be, again, yes and no. No, primarily because, first of all, when you say volition, I want to change the terms and conditions of this life. I didn't read the fine print when I was born, that the terms and conditions apply. Now, I want to renegotiate all this. This is not working for me. But that volition, that desire is part of the mind. Is at the level, I'll come to you, is at the level of the mind. Pure consciousness is the witness of that too. Remember, my desire to change the terms and conditions of my life, it disappears when I fall asleep and I start dreaming something else. It disappears completely when I go into deep sleep. But pure consciousness continues. So the volition of making this change or that change is not a part of your real nature. It appears as part of the dream, as much as the project of a character in a movie would be. A person in the movie wants to do something in the movie, achieve great things in the movie. Now, you are the watcher of the movie. The hero's project in the movie is not your project. You identify with it and you enjoy the whole thing, but it's not your project.
I don't mean at the level of me as such. I mean like exactly the supreme consciousness.
The supreme consciousness.
Can it change the universe that it's dreaming?
Right. You ask the question, you use terms like omnipotence of pure consciousness.
Yeah.
All right. Now we come to the second level of this. Is there someone in charge? All right. Asha is not in charge of the universe. We have settled that. But is there somebody in charge at all? Anybody out there? Yes. So that is the idea of God in Advaita Vedanta. The absolute reality, pure consciousness, is one thing, which let's just call it Brahman. And there is something called Ishvara or God, the God of religion. And Vedanta accepts it, that there is pure consciousness with the power of Maya, which is called Ishvara, which is in charge of creating, maintaining, and finally destroying this entire universe. And again creating, maintaining, just like your own day goes through waking, dreaming, deep sleep, and again waking, dreaming, deep sleep. Similarly, on a cosmic scale, There is a consciousness which wakes up, and then this universe is created, and the whole work day is this universe, and then that cosmic consciousness goes to bed, and the whole universe disappears. Srishti, Sthiti, Pralaya. Creation or projection, existence of this universe, and then disappearance of this universe. And again, repeat, and so on. All of those are appearances in pure consciousness. But at the level of the appearance, there is something in charge, which is called the God of the universe. That's not the individual being. The universe doesn't run according to our whims. Almost nothing runs according to our whims. I love that when Professor Bryant, he said, what do you mean I am Brahman? God is in charge of running the universe. God controls the universe. I can't even control my own bowel movements. So there's this huge difference, gulf between the individual being and the cosmic being. Individual being, Jiva in Sanskrit. Cosmic being is Shiva. It sort of rhymes nicely, Jiva and Shiva. Ishvara. Saguna Brahman, Brahman with attributes. But beyond the individual and the cosmic is you, the basic awareness, the pure consciousness. That's your real nature. And that's also God's real nature. It's calculating, the wheels are turning. Yes.
So the pure consciousness is unmoving, is still, is peaceful. It's beyond attributes and
beyond
desire.
Attributes. And that's called Nirguna Brahman.
But from that is what creation arises. So the very creating, isn't that kind of like I don't know whether to say desire, but it's like a disturbance or
yes.
In that pure.
If it actually did disturb or change, you could say that. But it actually doesn't disturb. How disturbed is the screen when there is a comedy playing, a tragedy playing, a horror film playing, or no movie at all playing? Is the screen exactly the same? It's the same. It's absolutely the same. One must distinguish between consciousness as such and mind. When I think, the mind moves. There are things happening in the mind. When I think, I imagine, I enjoy, I suffer, I wake, I dream, I fall asleep. All of this is mind, not consciousness. And it's lit up by you, the consciousness. Your only job, quote unquote, it's not a job, it's your very nature, is shining. This undiluted, unaffected shining is our real nature, Brahman. There, it's always perfectly peaceful. Or peace itself, in fact, that's the name used in the Mandukya. Shantam. You are peace itself. And there is a temporary peace and rest and restlessness going on in the world of appearance. Yes.
Thank you, Swamiji.
What about the other hand?
I asked.
Okay, you asked the question. Good.
You've only got two hands.
Let's see some more questions, and who else? Somebody from this side? Somebody was asking. And the gentleman here, and then I'll come to you.
Yeah. Charlie Hamnet asks, it appears the Platonic notion of God, as the Platonists understand it, is that of being impersonal, being idealistic monism. This ties into karma being an impersonal process, and similarly the idea of the absolute/Brahman being an impersonal state. Yet I quite like the idea of God being personable and bestowing grace, as in the Abrahamic tradition. I have heard that Advaita Vedanta has a nuanced understanding of God, that God can be both personal and impersonal, or monistic and monotheistic at the same time. Please explain.
Yes. That's a very important point in Advaita metaphysics. The nature of God. Somebody put it beautifully in an interview. This gentleman who is a Vedanta scholar and a devotee in the Vedanta Society of Southern California is interviewed about what exactly is Vedanta, how do you understand Vedanta? And he said, how do I put it? Vedanta, think of Buddhism with God. Which is a fun way of putting it. Yeah. Another person wrote saying that she was into Buddhism. She moved from Christianity to Buddhism. Then she said she moved into Vedanta afterwards. Why? Because She said, I missed God. I missed the old curmudgeon. In Buddhism, no God. So can we have this impersonal philosophy with a personal God? You can. Vivekananda says impersonal in Advaita Vedanta does not mean the negation of personality. He says that you can have as many personalities as you want. There's a cosmic personality of God, which is called Saguna Brahman, Brahman with attributes. Another name is Ishvara, the Lord of all. And then incarnation of God. And as many incarnations, many incarnations in Hinduism. Not just one. So multiple incarnations. You can have as many personalities as you like. Because it's that one impersonal consciousness appearing as so many personalities. Just look around you. So many personalities around you. And so it can appear as the cosmic divine personality of God. But there's only one of those. But that too can appear in many ways in many religions and to many mystics across the world in different ways. But it's one God. One cosmic God. So, to put it briefly and more precisely, what is the conception of God in Hinduism? It is impersonal, personal. Impersonal, personal. Impersonal as existence, consciousness, bliss. Pure being, pure awareness. Pure not in the sense of nice and good. Pure in the sense of without any attributes. Pure being, isness, existence itself. Pure consciousness, awareness itself. And ananda, bliss itself. Bliss itself means fulfillment, utter fulfillment. Think about it this way. The three main questions of philosophy. The three great questions of philosophy. What is real? And the branch of philosophy which deals with that used to be called metaphysics, now is called ontology. Then the second, how do we know anything at all? And the branch of philosophy which deals with that is epistemology. And third, there was this whole group of fields, aesthetics, ethics, all of that is now clubbed under values. So it's called axiology. So this covers broadly more or less all of philosophy. Ontology, epistemology, axiology. And there are three questions. What is real? How do we know anything? And what's good or beautiful? And now notice the three ways in which the absolute is described in Vedanta. Sat, Chit, Ananda. Being, consciousness, bliss. Notice how these are three answers to these three questions. What is real? Existence itself. Just being itself is the only reality that there is. Then second, how do we know anything? Consciousness. Chaitanya, that being has this characteristic of being ever shining. Not just a dark, dead being, but ever shining. So that shining itself makes knowledge possible. And then that being itself is all fulfillment. Whatever we are trying to do in life, reach for fulfillment through ethics. Whatever is good, whatever is beautiful, is we are trying to reach that absolute reality. And that itself is all fulfillment. Ananda, bliss. So that's the impersonal conception of the ultimate reality in Vedanta, in Advaita Vedanta. But then there's a personal conception also. That impersonal reality in association with the power of Maya, and where does Maya enter the picture? All that is there's enormous complication there. But in association with the power of Maya is called God, the personal God. And that personal God is also infinite, and it can be expressed with infinite characteristics. The impersonal Brahman, no characteristics, no attribution. You say, didn't you just say it is Sat, Chit, Ananda, aren't those attributes? They are not, but we can discuss that. They are the very nature. They are not qualities of God. They are what the impersonal God is, or the ultimate reality is. But the personal God has many attributes. All loving, omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent. Basically the powers we associate God with. All auspicious qualities. Ananta Kalyana Gunagana in the language of Ramanujacharya. Endless auspicious qualities. So that is the personal God. And that personal God can be worshipped in many ways. Because it's of infinite attributes. You can worship as Vishnu, as Shiva, as Devi, with human form, with non-human form, with no form, formless but with qualities. He mentioned the God in the Abrahamic religions. God in the Abrahamic religions is this personal God. The God who is all-powerful, all-loving, just. In Abrahamic traditions, without any form. It's formless. In Vedanta, with form and without form. When you say, but Hinduism worships God with so many forms. But when you go to the hymns and the mantras associated with God with form, with Vishnu or Shiva, you'll always see the Nirguna, Nirakara also mentioned. The formless, God as formless. So formless with attributes. With form and with attributes. And with human form and human attributes also, as the incarnations of God, multiple incarnations of God. So these are the two ways in which God is understood in Hinduism, with the impersonal, personal. We'll take one more question and come to you. Yes.
This question is from Wojciech Laskowski from Poland. I did some research on the topic of Panchakosha recently and also watched one of your lectures about it. I have one problem. It seems to me that the name bliss to the fifth cover of Atman is misleading. It is also known as the causal body, which is associated with the deep sleep state. It contains the seed of whatever happens in the remaining layers of being. It seems to me that this layer can contain negative tendencies called samskaras. I tend to think that the Atman can be in a less blissful state. This would explain perfectly why in dream sleep we can have nightmares. Is my reasoning right, or have I made a mistake? I would be grateful for your help here.
So he's referring to the Panchakosha, the 5 layers of the human personality, or 5 layers of personality, which are, what are the 5 layers? The physical body, the vital body, the mental body, and the intellect body, and the causal body. Annamaya, Pranamaya, Manomaya, Vijnanamaya, Anandamaya. But notice, they're all bodies. They're not you. We are embodied in these 5. We think we are embodied only in this physical body. No, there are successively, like Russian nesting dolls. So there are successively subtler and subtler layers of this being. But you are none of them. But you exist in and through them. You appear or you manifest or you are here through them. So these 5. And this is a methodology, it's another methodology for enlightenment. This is from the Taittiriya Upanishad. The 3 states of waking, dreaming, deep sleep leading to the realization of the 4th, that is from the Mandukya Upanishad. The 5 states of the physical, of the human personality, Panchakosha, 5 layers or 5 sheaths, that's from the Taittiriya Upanishad. So this is from Taittiriya Upanishad. Now the subtlest one, it is the called the Anandamaya kosha. Literally, if you translate, the blissful sheath. What does it correspond to? It's like our experience in deep sleep. Now he says that, but is it blissful? For 2 reasons he finds it difficult. One is, we don't experience any bliss in deep sleep. It's just blank. Second, don't we say that this is the causal, not casual, causal sheath? That's where all the cause of the person, the seeds of our personality are there, including all the unpleasant stuff. It's all there. It's just shut down in deep sleep, but it manifests. So why do we call it the blissful sheath? Is it right? The answer is, no, you've got it pretty right. But the only thing is, it's called blissful not because you enjoy lots of positive pleasure there, but it's free of all trouble. The experience in deep sleep, when we wake up from sleep, we say there was dreams, and there was also a time when there was nothing, basically. We say, I slept like a log, and so on. These expressions are there in different languages across the world, which correspond to deep sleep. And they all report a lack of any kind of trouble there. So this complete trouble-free sleep, without any kind of what is called in Sanskrit upadrava, the mischief of this world. Even the person, I always say, the person who is dying in the ICU in the hospital, Terrible problems in the world. That means I was just about to die. But that person, when that person goes into deep sleep, no problem at all. That means these problems are always mediated. I'm not dismissing the problems at the level of the world, at the level of the body, but they're all mediated through the mind. When the mind shuts down, you, the experiencing consciousness, has no experience of these problems. So the deep sleep state, what is the deep sleep state? It is the shutdown condition of the mind. This waking, dreaming, deep sleep, all of them, they are all states of the mind, not of consciousness. Consciousness has only one state, shining. So the deep sleep state is free of all problems, and therefore it is called problem-free. In that sense, blissful. The report is, in Sanskrit, they say, Sukham aham aswapsa nakinchid avedisham. I slept happily, I did not know anything. That was the report of deep sleep. In that sense, happily. And we seek it. It's not just a blank state of nothingness. People take pills and, they really, really miss deep sleep. If deep sleep is not there, we are aware of it. I slept. How was your sleep? Not too well. No, I slept lightly. It was disturbed. I had dreams and, sort of lightly slept. That we miss deep sleep. And sleep scientists have reported that as one ages, the ability to sleep deeply also goes away. One sleeps more, but those light and disturbed sleep. Yes. Now, he points out that the deep sleep has the seeds of all the nasty things in our life also. True. That's why one can have nightmares in dreams. But in deep sleep itself, the nasty side of it and the good side of it, all are dormant. So the nasty side of it is not manifest in deep sleep. And therefore, you don't feel. So it's correct to call it the blissful sheath. Only thing is, we must remember, it's not where, like in the waking state or the dream state, if there is something nice going on, I feel I am enjoying this, I like this. That kind of feeling is not there in deep sleep, because the sense of the I has gone. All particularities are erased there. That is a state of uniform blankness. Although all the causes of the waking and dreaming are there, but in a dormant state. That's why it's all right to call it the blissful, but you have to understand blissful in that sense only. All right. Please come. And then we'll come to you. Tell us your name and ask the question.
Thank you, Swamiji. My name is Girish. And you've talked about the parallels between Advaita, Vedanta, and Madhyamaka. And, Shunyata and Purnata being two sides of the same coin, essentially. But I'm wondering about the concept of dependent origination. How does that map into Advaitic concepts or paradigms? Or
It's a big question. And I'll give you a short answer to it. Why I said big question, I'm reminded of a similar question I had asked to a right person too. He was the head of one of the 4 great orders of Tibetan monasticism. There is the Gelugpa, which is headed by the Dalai Lama, but there is the Sakyapa, there is the Kagyupa, and there is the Nyingmapa, the Nyingma tradition. So the Sakya tradition, their main monastery in India is near our monastery near Dehradun in India. So it's within walking distance. There's a huge Tibetan monastery there. And I went there and I met the head of the Sakya lineage at that time, called the Sakya Trizin, who has passed now. Now the next person is in charge now. But I met the earlier one. And there was a long queue of people waiting to take his blessings. I was a newly minted monk from the Ramakrishna order. So I was in the queue. And when my turn came up, so there's this very powerfully built, he's big and with tremendous charisma. You can see the power radiating of this person. Mostly they were Tibetans and a few Indians, and I was there in that line also. So when I went up to him, mostly people were asking for worldly blessings, and somebody wanted this or that, and he would give them, he would bless them. Now I had a question, same question that Girish had. What is the connection between, what is the relationship between Brahman and Shunya, the emptiness, and the Purnata of Advaita? Advaita, Vedanta, and Madhyamaka. What is the relationship? Brahman and emptiness. I said who I am, And then I asked the question, I bowed down to him. He looked at me and he smiled. And he said, "Big question, no time." But your question was more precise. How would something like dependent origination be worked into, or what parallel would it have in Advaita Vedanta? Now notice, according to Nagarjuna, dependent origination and shunyata are the same thing. In fact, at the very beginning of the Mula Madhyamaka Karika, the original text, Nagarjuna says, what is called pratitya samutpada, that is what we call emptiness. What is called dependent origination. Dependent origination is very simple. I mean, if you go into the 12 linked chain of dependent origination, that's more complicated. But basic idea is this arising, that arises. This not arising, that does not arise. Now, if you want nirvana, the samsara is arising clearly. You want nirvana, freedom from the samsara. You have to find out what arising makes the samsara arise. If you can stop that from arising, this will also not arise. Basically, that's the idea of dependent origination. And therefore, Nagarjuna uses shunyata in two senses. This world of samsara is also shunya, empty. We have to realize that. And the ultimate reality is also empty, shunya. But in what sense the ultimate reality is empty? In what sense this samsara is empty? In what sense is this samsara empty? Dependent origination. This immediately maps, if you want to map at all, it maps onto the Advaitic concept of Maya. Samsara is Maya. And what is the nature of Maya? From a Buddhistic analysis, it would be dependent origination. That's it. I mean, I can just this
Thank
much.
you.
Yes. Tell us your name and ask the question.
Namaste, Swamiji. My name is Hani. I'm here from London, actually. And I come from the Sufi tradition, but I've been studying Vedanta for about 10 years now, so I'm a Vedantan Sufi, and I've learned from you your lectures tremendously, so thank you. My question relates to reincarnation, because I see that the core teaching across all of the traditions match, the non-duality is almost identical, I would say. But this area feels like a distinct difference of opinion. And the objection I hear is presented in kind of Aristotelian terms. If you're going from a causal potential state and become actualized, then the tree doesn't return to a seed state. So how is it possible to go from an actualized back to potential in order to see a cycle of reincarnation happen? And I know it's a big topic also, so maybe you can also point me to which books or scripture or commentaries specifically go into reincarnation in more philosophical detail, please. Thank you.
Okay, that's a good question. This marks a fundamental difference between, say, the Indian tradition and the Abrahamic tradition. Now, in the Indian tradition, this karma and reincarnation is common to all the Indian traditions. It's an interesting thing. The Buddhists and the Hindus do not agree on fundamentals like the existence of God. Buddhists don't agree about the existence of God. Hindus say God exists. Buddhists don't agree about the Atman, like there is like eternal reality of the self called the Atman. Buddhists talk about anatman, no self. And yet, the Buddhists, all the Buddhists and all the Hindus and all the Jainas and all the Sikhs, they're all agreed on the fact that there is karma and reincarnation. So you see how karma leads to reincarnation. That part is clear. Because if there is no previous existence, then all this disparity cannot be explained. And if there is no future existence, then all the karma that we are doing and we have done in the past, where do the results go? So we must have existed earlier, and we must exist in the future. And especially if we do not, there are more serious metaphysical consequences, like coming out of nothing, and and then either disappearing into nothing, or coming out of nothing and existing eternally, which also seems rather ridiculous. So you must have existed in some sense earlier, you must exist in some sense in the future. Notice all the Abrahamic religions say that you do exist after death. All of us do, otherwise religion doesn't make sense. All right. My personal way of, I'll go into details, but my personal way of reconciling these two is that the Indian traditions have a wider view of it. If you take a big circle, huge circle, and if you take a tiny piece of it, it looks like a straight line, birth to death. But if you step back, it seems going around, like you come back in a circle. All right. Now a little more detail. First, I'll take the tree and tree example. So from a seed comes a plant and a tree, and then the tree dies. That tree is not reborn, is not actually continuing, but it gives rise to seeds, which continues in the form of new trees, and they are not exactly the same tree. This is what is called a type token difference in philosophy. The trees are all individual. They may be the same type, the same DNA continuing, fine. Now this seems to go against the Hindu view of reincarnation, where something persists over lifetime. It's the same thing being reborn again and again and again. But it matches quite well with the Buddhist idea of reincarnation. The Buddhist idea of reincarnation and the Hindu idea of reincarnation, there is some difference. The Buddhist idea of reincarnation is a process. It's like a wave in a rope. If you have a rope and you shake it and a wave propagates along the rope, it's not that the same thing is traveling down the rope. At every point, the rope is lifted and comes down. So, a certain impulse is transmitted across time and space. And so, that might be a better way of describing the Buddhist view of reincarnation. What is the Hindu view of reincarnation? The Atman remaining unchanged. It is the subtle body. The subtle body, which is in Vedanta, it is the pranamaya, the 5 layers which we talked about, the pranamaya, manomaya, vijnanamaya. These 3 are called the subtle body. And then there's the causal body. The causal body and the subtle body persist from lifetime to lifetime. It's only the physical body which is destroyed. So when the death comes, it's the death of the physical body. The subtle body goes on to take up new bodies. So the subtle body is not destroyed when death comes. The subtle body carries the impressions of past lives. And this is what is reborn. The Atman remains unchanged. In whichever philosophy, in Hindu philosophy, Advaita Vedanta, it's absolutely unchanged. Now, this is how they explain multiple lifetimes. And then when moksha, liberation is attained, physical body will die, of course, and the subtle body also stops propagating at the point of the death of the physical body. So the difference between the death of an enlightened person and death of a non-enlightened person is, at the death of the physical body of the enlightened person, the body dies and the subtle body disappears back into nature. The Mundaka Upanishad, other Upanishads speak about it. The unenlightened person, the body dies, but the subtle body goes on. So a personality keeps on going from lifetime to lifetime. So this is the idea. Now, in non-duality, however, Advaita Vedanta, how this can be reconciled, the Abrahamic idea and the Indian idea is that in non-duality, karma and reincarnation, along with everything else, is relegated to what is called the transactional or the lower truth. So, what is the importance of rebirth, karma, in Advaita Vedanta? Answer is no importance at all. Is it essential to Advaita Vedanta? No. It is part of the lower truth. You want an explanation of what's going on here? A very good explanation is karma and reincarnation. But it's only an explanation because you're asking a question. The question itself happens to be wrong, so the explanation also does not hold much water. I'll give a little story anecdote and we'll stop it there. There was this monk of our order in the Himalayas in Uttarkashi. I know him. So at one time he had a bee in his bonnet about the Abrahamic idea of only one lifetime and the Indian idea of multiple lifetimes, karma and rebirth. In Hindi it's called punarjanma, rebirth, which is true. This is true or that is true. And arguments in favor of this, arguments in favor of that, until the monks in the cottage got bored of it all. Nobody was willing to listen to his arguments. So he decided to take his dialectic outside the cottage to the next school, which was a school of a master who taught a very radical form of non-dualism, Advaita Vedanta. So this monk who belongs to our order, he went to this teacher and he said, Swami, here are those who say there's only one lifetime and no multiple lifetimes. And here is our so many theories which say that there's punarjanma. So which is true? Punarjanma means multiple life, rebirth. And the Swami said to him, Mahatma ji, jab janm hi nahi to punarjanma kahe ka? Aap Mandukya padhiye. Oh monk, when there is no birth, where is the question of rebirth? Please read the Mandukya Upanishad. From the Advaitic perspective, let alone multiple lifetimes, they say there is no multiple lifetimes. So is it true that in the Abrahamic religions have it right? There's one lifetime. They say there's not even one lifetime. There's no birth at all. Are there multiple shows of the same movie or one show? Doesn't matter. It's a movie. If you see in the movie, the hero goes through these troubles and then finally triumphs and the movie comes to an end. If you ask the question, will the hero have to go through it all over again and again and again and again? Maybe, maybe not. But the real answer is, not even once did the hero go through any of this. That's the answer. So from an Advaitic, from a dualistic Hindu perspective, it's a very serious question. And they will maintain rebirth, multiple lifetimes. Most Indian schools will maintain it very strongly, and there are very good reasons to do so. From an Advaitic position, you can see it's not an important question.
I see that. Any specific books that you would
one
point
book, have you heard of Reza Kazemi?
Yes.
Right. So his Paths of Transcendence. It's a wonderful book. Have you seen that book?
Yes.
So there he compares Shankara, I think
Ibn Arabi,
and Meister Eckhart. Yes. It's a really nice book.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Can we... Okay, the lady there. Yes, please come. Tell us your name and ask the question. I will take one more question.
Hello, my name is Sajni.
Yes.
I come from a Christian tradition. The question I had was, is there a concept in Hinduism about a personal God that can suffer?
A personal God that can suffer? Again, yes and no. Personal God to suffer would have to be incarnated, just like the Christian God. So Jesus suffered.
Yeah.
And was that suffering real? Yes, it was real. In the same way, we believe that Sri Ramakrishna is incarnation. Did he suffer from cancer and die? Yes. So the pain that a human being would have for throat cancer and death is the same thing that the incarnation also undergoes. So God suffers with suffering humanity. That's why we can relate to God. And yet the answer is no. Because the incarnation, whether Ramakrishna or Jesus, they show us a way to transcend suffering. We are limited and we are helpless in the jaws of suffering. Whereas the incarnation shows us, yes, I suffer along with you and I feel every bit of the pain that you feel. But here is a way to transcend. That's why the story I often tell, there are many such examples, but one example, famous example, is when he is dying from throat cancer. His disciple, Hari, who later became Turiyananda, comes and asks him, "Sir, how are you today?" And he says, "It hurts, the throat, the tumor in the throat, and I can't eat." And then Hari says to him, "But sir, I see that you're in great bliss." And Sri Ramakrishna, strangely enough, he laughs and he says, "Oh, the rascal has found me out." In Bengali, Shara dhore niyeche. So which means, here is the difference between the incarnation and the non-incarnation. There is a level at which the incarnation is aware of his divinity, and that helps him to transcend suffering at the human level. Both are true. Both are true. It's not that the human level is a play. For a long period of time, both in Hinduism and in Christianity, there were theories, because there are people who cannot accept that God can suffer.
Yeah.
So there were theories that, no, Jesus actually did not suffer. Almost exactly like we have similar theories in Hinduism. So, for example, the Jesus that died on the cross was an illusory Jesus. The real Jesus did not die on the cross. Now you can see how that both of that makes sense. The only thing what happened in Christianity was because the idea is that there must be one truth. So any deviation from that truth must be false. So these other theories were rejected as heretical. These were heresies.
Yeah.
They were powerful schools at one time. They rejected the heresy and purged out. In Hinduism, what happens is everything continues parallelly. So there's no concept of that's wrong or this is wrong. And that makes sense from an Advaitic perspective, because an Advaitic perspective, all these perspectives are more or less helpful to the realization of the truth. Some may be more helpful, some may be less helpful. So let them all stay.
Yes.
So Sita, was she actually imprisoned by Ravana? Or did she actually enter the fire on the command of the wish of Rama? So there's one theory which cannot bear the idea of Sita being imprisoned or entering into the fire. So that was an illusory, the real Sita was hiding in fire, and illusory Sita was imprisoned by the demon king. So such, you see, the very similar in theory. But what does it mean actually? Is there some grounding in truth? Yes, it is. When Sri Ramakrishna says, yes, I am actually suffering. He's not play acting that I am sick and it's painful. He's suffering as much as any cancer patient would suffer. But when he's saying I am beyond that suffering also, I am actually in bliss also, and that's also true. That's also true. And that opens the door for us to see how in the midst of this material world, without denying any of the materiality, without denying any science, one can also see there is the truth of spirituality which transcends this.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll take one more question. No more questions now, just one from the internet audience. We've really gone up beyond time.
That's okay, Swami. This is a question from Andrew Gonzalez, which goes to the question of human suffering. If all is Brahman, then what is so wrong with Maya? At the most absolute metaphysical level, oneness with Brahman can be believed and even felt. However, there are many human emotions and sentiments which seem to me to have their own profundity as part of the human experience, which don't have anything to do with oneness with Brahman. The easiest and starkest example might be the experience of grief that can be categorized as sorrow, which is not merely a source of suffering, but also a source of inspiration and beauty for human creativity. My concern is that understanding one with Brahman might flatten the texture of human experience. Even though the texts speak of going beyond sorrow, might one realize oneness with Brahman and thereby fully embrace every aspect of the human experience, which makes up such a large portion of poetry and music all over the world?
Oh, good question, and a good point to end today's discussion on. So the idea is that what's wrong with Maya? I mean, the idea behind that question seems to be, if you become enlightened, if you feel you are limitless existence, consciousness, bliss, would it be a little boring? Would everything come to an end? You're talking about the end of the cycle of birth and death, the end of the game of life, as if that's a good thing. Wouldn't it be a boring thing? Wouldn't it be an awful thing? That's why he says it sort of tends to flatten things out. What about all the enormous variety of life? The quest for science, the beauty of art, and even to a certain extent, there's a deep poetic beauty, a sad beauty about the flow of human life, the ebb and flow of human affairs, in personal life, in life of the world. Wouldn't all that be flattened, sort of erased in, your one radiance, or something shining forth, and then sort of a kind of a blinding light where you lose sight of everything else? So that seems to be the idea behind it. No, don't worry. I'll tell you why, but before that, one great way of answering this question and other such questions is always to look at the lives of people you consider to be enlightened. Did they appear bored? Oh no, I have attained nirvana. How boring. I wish I hadn't. No. We on this side of nirvana, on this side of moksha, we are subject to excitement and ennui. Ennui is boredom. We are subject to that. The pleasant and unpleasant, nice and enthralling, and boring and awful. On that side of nirvana, they are not. Not that they are perpetually excited. They seem to have an unceasing supply of fulfillment and happiness, not dependent on anything outside. They're not bored by anything outside, nor are they unnecessarily excited by anything outside in this world or in the body-mind. But they have a source which is unending. What is wrong with Maya? Nothing. Nothing really, as long as you know it's Maya. What's wrong with a movie? When you realize it's a movie, do you have to switch off the movie and keep staring at the blank screen? That would be very boring. No. When you realize it's a movie, you can watch the movie as long as you like. When the movie is switched off, it's not an awful disaster. The most horrifying of movies, the greatest of tragedies is not awful. That's also aesthetic enjoyment. And so is comedies and the pleasant movies, all of them. The only thing that is wrong in this realm of Maya is not knowing the Maya nature of things and not knowing the ground reality, not having God realization, not having enlightenment. That's the only thing that's wrong. That's the only thing that's at the root of all suffering. There is a saying in Panchadashi, one of the texts of Advaita Vedanta, which says, it makes a distinction between Ishvara Srishti and Jiva Srishti, the creation of God, not absolute reality, just the God of religion, the creation of God, and the creation of human beings, sentient beings. And it says all suffering is actually due to the creation of our sentient beings. God's creation does not create suffering for anybody. So after enlightenment, the enlightened beings, do they see this world or not? Or is it all erased? They see this world. If they have eyes, they will see forms. If they have ears, they will hear sounds. If they have skin, they will feel heat and cold, pressure, warmth, all of that. If they have a mind, they will think, and a heart to feel. All of that continues. They probably feel more deeply and more subtly than we do. They may even suffer more than we do, and enjoy more than we do. However, they can also transcend this all at a moment's notice, because they see the reality beyond this, a transcendent reality, where they're identified with that. So, for them, Maya, this creation, it is a glory. It is something amazing. It's not something that has to be dismissed and gotten over with. Oh, I can tell you this. What is this world from a Vedantic perspective? So a monk, Pranava Chaitanya Puri, he told me this. He is a traditional Vedanta teacher from Banaras. So he said, in the Gita, the world has this, the status of the world is like this. First of all, it is heya, to be given up. Why? It is because it is dukkha, suffering. It is anitya, impermanent. Mithya, false. And all of these are from Gita shlokas. So the world is a place of suffering. The world is impermanent. Everything in the world is impermanent. And not only that, it's actually false. It's like a mirage. It's an appearance. And hence, heya, to be given up. That's the first status of the world. The next status, it is divya, it is divine. Once you have given up this worldly concern and stepped back from it, and you connect it to God, then you see the manifestation of God in everything in this world. So you see the divinity reflected in this world. In the Bhagavad Gita, in the first 6 chapters, it is dispassion for the world. In the next 6 chapters, and we are coming to that in our study of the Bhagavad Gita, 10th chapter, Krishna will point out divinity in the things in the world. Not that those objects are divine, but because they are connected, they are from the divinity. You see the divinity reflected in this world. That which is to be given up is now, after giving up, you see the divinity. Giving up means our worldly attachment to this world. And then you see the divinity in the things of the world. That's the second level of understanding the world. Same word, exactly same word. And the third level of understanding, Brahma Swarupa. It is nothing other than Brahman itself. So three levels. Heya, to be given up. Deeper understanding, divya, it is divine. You can see divinity here. And third, it's not just divine. It is Brahman alone. Like the rope appears as the snake. It's not a world, Brahman alone. Non-dual. It's not, the ultimate truth is not that Brahman created a world. It didn't. Nothing was ever born of that absolute reality. I'm quoting from the Quran now. The ultimate reality does not give birth. Nothing is born which is not born of anything, nor does it give birth to anything. And yet here is this whole world. This is Mandukya Upanishad, beyond causality. Ultimate reality is beyond causality. There is no causal connection between this world and the ultimate reality. So the ultimate reality alone exists. Many people don't know this. This is the core truth talked about in the highest Advaita text in Mandukya. And this is how the Quran begins actually. The first thing in the Quran is this. Of course, that's a non-dual interpretation. Yeah. All right. On that beautiful note, let us end. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Shri Ram Krishna Arpanamastu.